just wonder when people are going to start questioning Senator Rand Paul's medical credentials. Holy smokes. I mean, now they're against vaccines. Like every vaccine, every needle, the government's behind it, and it's going to kill you. Really? Tell that to the folks decades ago when they were dealing with polio. Thank you, Hillary Clinton, for tweeting out what you did. The earth is round. Good to have you with us, folks, here on this Tuesday edition from the snowy North Country. Here on the Ed Schultz Internet Broadcast, Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this podcast. So they're all mulling over the budget right now. The 2016 budget proposal is going to throw $1.5 trillion in new taxes over the next decade. The Republicans are squirming over this. Look, the president has to do this. We have to run the country because we're way behind the curve on things that have to be done, like infrastructure, like bridges falling down, and nobody doing anything about it. So here comes the horse trading, and it's going to be somewhere along the lines of corporate taxes. This is Congressman Duffy this morning on MSNBC talking about, and this is code stuff right here, well, we have to simplify the tax code.
Listen, so what we think in tax reform is that we should actually restructure the whole code. Take out all the loopholes, the deductions, the preferences that have been put in there for generations, that have been put there by people who have powerful lobbyists in Washington, and start over, reducing rates. But taking some one-offs, I think that the president and his proposals increasing taxes are one of the reasons why so many corporations are doing these inversions, finding foreign partners to buy them so they get lower tax rates in other parts of the world. We have one of the highest tax rates in the industrialized world. Let's be competitive again. Let's actually lower our taxes and make America competitive, put our people back to work. That's the engine of opportunity.
You know, I don't know what sentence to start with. There's so much misinformation there. It is true we do have high tax rates, but with all the loopholes and all the write-offs, it's a Mitt Romney return. It comes down to really about 16 or 17%. And this idea that America's not competitive, haven't they learned anything at all from the car industry as to what we've done there? The rebounding of all of the big three in America in the record year that they've had? The Republicans are negative on everything, and they are so horribly misguided. I'll give you an example today. This is going to be the 65th time that the Republicans in the House are going to repeal Obamacare. Now, what's different about all of this is that now the majority is with the Republicans over in the Senate. So it's not going to die in the Senate. It's going to pass in the House, then it's going to come over to the Senate. Mitch McConnell's going to bring it to the floor. And this is one time I like this, because now we're going to find out what conservative Democrats really think of Obamacare. And I'm talking about Tester and Heitkamp and McCaskill and Casey and Bennett and folks like that in Manchin from West Virginia. Do they want to be with Obamacare? So this is a rather interesting day. But back to the budget for a moment. It's the tax code. They always want to simplify it. And the loopholes that they're talking about. The loopholes favor the corporations. That's why 1 in 4 corporations in this country pay no tax whatsoever. For more on this, let's go to Sherrod Brown, Senator from Ohio. Senator, always a pleasure. Good to have you with us.
My pleasure, too. Thank you, Ed.
Where's the horse trading going to take place here on the president's budget proposal to bring in $1.5 trillion in new taxes over a decade, over 10 years? Your thoughts?
Well, we need to do it. We need to find a way to. I mean, we talk about. I know what you think. Same thing I think about trade agreements and how they cost us jobs. We've got to do real infrastructure, real jobs, real job growth, real good-paying union job growth. Every place we can, and infrastructure's it. I go, when I've heard what you were saying a minute ago, I just sat in the Finance Committee, which is the tax writing committee, and I heard Republican after Republican engage in the worst kind of class warfare aimed at low-income workers by going after the IRS commissioner on what they call fraud, which isn't. It's mostly not fraud. They call fraud with the Earned Income Tax Credit, the best anti-poverty program we've ever had. It lifts 30 million people, including 10 million children, out of poverty. They go after low-income workers At the same time, they not a peep about tax evasion, not a peep about more audits of higher income people that always bring a whole lot more money in than any audits of a working class man or woman. Not a peep about that. Only the worst kind of class warfare aimed at low income workers.
It really is amazing. They're living in a dream world. How do they want to do infrastructure? I mean, and this is a big piece of the of the president's budget.
Yeah, they want the Republicans are in a tough place because they have a lot of contributors that want to do infrastructure. I mean, most people I know that build roads, most of the company owners in the executives are Republicans. The workers are typically Democrats that are making good union wages, from operating engineers to steel workers to the tradespeople themselves, the cement masons and the laborers. I think they do, but I think they can't get past their antipathy to Obama. And if it's an Obama plan, it must be wrong. So, and they can't raise the gas tax because they promised never in the history of the world to ever raise a tax or close a tax loophole, never ever. So, I mean, that's the excuse. I mean, we ought to be closing these tax loopholes. We do this. The president's plan, essentially, I mean, you can say it raised taxes on the wealthy, and it does, but it also closes tax loopholes. Fundamentally, and that's what we should be doing, and that money should go for jobs and should go for infrastructure. We know infrastructure is some of the best job creation that you can do.
The loopholes, if you go back and look at the tax code over the last 40 years, the loopholes have been created by Republicans who are, in their world, pro-business to give businesses incentives to do certain things. And so now they're saying, well, we got to close the loophole. I don't think they know what they want.
Yeah, well, they say they want to close tax loopholes until we actually do it. I mean, the most glaring one that you've talked on your show a number of times is that if you shut down production in Xenia, Ohio, or Jackson, Ohio, or Zanesville, Ohio, and you move to Wuhan, Xi'an, Beijing, China, you can deduct the cost of the shutdown against your federal taxes and deduct the cost of the new plant in China against your federal taxes. That's the most glaring and the one they least want to close, because their crowd, the people they support, one reason they're always for trade agreements is that it helps them do the business plan to sell build it, produce it overseas, and sell it back into the U.S. It's corrupt. It's bad for our country. It's bad for our workers. It's bad for small businesses that can't do that. And it's bad for our communities. I spoke to a bunch of school board people in Ohio today, and they know what lost manufacturing does to their school districts, teacher layoffs, all of those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. We're going to do more on that on the Ed Show, where manufacturing is going to go, and the timetable of the TPP is pretty scary. I want to go to health care quickly. The House is voting on it again today to repeal it. And let me give you an example. A disgruntled employee or someone who's not happy goes into the boss, you pick the business, complains about this, that, and the other, all the way across the board, and the boss says, well, what's your solution? Well, I don't have one. Folks, that's where the Republicans are with health care right now. John Hoeven, senator from North Dakota, says, I'm on board with repeal and replace. He tells the Washington Examiner, his next quote is, we are trying to figure out what's the best strategy to do that. So in other words, they want to repeal, but they have no clue, nor do they have a plan on what they're going to do with the millions of people that have been helped with the Affordable Care Act. I mean, this is no one in business would pull a stunt like this. But they continue to go down this road. Senator, I just think that this is just more hatred for the president and more obstruction in a different way. Your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. It's 4 years of repeal and replace. To replace, they come up with sell insurance across state lines. That's their favorite one. That would ensure 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 50 of the people that would lose their insurance. Here's the thing, Ed. I think on this is I want these Republicans to come to my state, and I want them to explain to 700,000 Ohioans who have health insurance today who would lose it like that if they could repeal the law. I want them to explain to the 100,000 young people between 18 and 26, additional to the 700,000, who are now on their parents' health plan. That's gone. I want to explain to the mother I met, Republican conservative mother from Cincinnati, that had been turned down 30 times, literally, because her son's diabetic, and she couldn't get insurance. She got it under the Affordable Care Act. Explain why she should have her insurance taken away. Explain to the million Ohio seniors who now have been getting for the last 3 years, I believe, 3.5 years, have gotten preventive care. They've gotten physicals and osteoporosis testing and diabetes screening without copay, without deductibles as Medicare beneficiaries. Explain those benefits. Explain to those people the benefits they're going to take away. They lose this debate because millions of people in my state have benefited, and multiply that times 40 or 50 around the country.
All right, let's quickly talk vaccines before we let you go here. There seems to be now a denial that vaccines are good for Americans. In an interview with C-SPAN, this is Senator Rand Paul talking about how people ought to be able to choose vaccines.
Did you really just say to Laura Ingraham that you think most vaccines in this country should be, quote, voluntary?
Well, I guess being for freedom would be really unusual. I guess I don't understand the point. I've heard of many tragic cases of walking, talking, normal children who wound up with profound mental disorders after vaccines. I'm not arguing vaccines are a bad idea. I think they're a good thing. But I think the parents should have some input.
Senator, your response to that?
Well, it's just ludicrous. This whole political party and these presidential candidates falling all over one another to deny science, from when it started with stem cell and it goes on to climate change and now this, they just look idiotic, and I just can't imagine that. I mean, Rand Paul's, I think he's an MD. I've always read he's an MD. I've never looked at his diploma. I assume he's an MD and an ophthalmologist, I think. I just can't imagine that if you're running for president, you ought to be responsible enough not to scare parents and not to undercut public health. I mean, these are the same people that wanted to scare us about Ebola and scare us about other things, and now they're playing into this whole movement that is terrible for our country. I mean, we've made such progress in public health in the last 100 years, eradicating TB and so eradicating smallpox and TB and polio and look at what we've done. And if this crowd were in control, we would start to repeal the 20th century, and it just would be awful.
It is amazing. Senator
Sherrod Brown, they should be embarrassed by it, frankly.
Well, they're climate deniers, and now they're medical deniers. I mean, they're just so anti-science. It's amazing. Senator, always a pleasure. Good to have you with us.
Mine too. Thanks. See ya.
You bet. Senator Sherrod Brown, Ohio, here on the Ed Schultz Internet broadcast. This is more of what he told CNBC. This is Senator Rand Paul. Listen to this.
Most of the research on this indicates that these actually cost more money over the long term than they save.
Well, that's incorrect. Let's go back again. Your premise and your question is mistaken, okay? Most of the research doesn't indicate that. Let me finish. Hey, let me finish. Hey, Kelly.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Calm down a bit here, Kelly. Let me answer the question.
I can tell you're fired up. I apologize for the extent to which I'm the reason for that. But what about 2016? Well, I mean, is this here with an eye towards you entering 2016 as a presidential candidate or maybe getting drafted into one of the campaigns?
We're thinking about it, and we're looking around the United States and seeing if the message resonates. Part of the problem is that you end up having interviews like this where the interview is so slanted and full of distortions that you don't get useful information. I think this is what's bad about TV sometimes. So frankly, I think if we do this again, you need to try to start out with a little more objectivity going into the interview.
A direct question about vaccines, and he gets defensive. They make up their own stats as they go along. Chris Christie says kids were vaccinated, but people deserve to have a choice on whether their kids should get their vaccination. Now, here, are they against flu shots too? I mean, I understand that. But what about, as Senator Brown was talking about, polio, smallpox, other things? This is Christie.
Do you think Americans should vaccinate their kids? Is the measles vaccine safe?
Well, all I can say is that we vaccinate ours, but I also understand that parents need to have some measure of choice in things as well. So that's the balance that the government has to decide.
This is President Obama in an interview on Sunday with NBC, talking about how American parents to get your kids vaccinated.
I understand that there are families that in some cases are concerned about the effect of vaccinations. The science is pretty indisputable. There aren't reasons to not get vaccinated.
Are you telling parents you should get your kids vaccinated?
You should get your kids vaccinated.
Pretty indisputable. This Internet broadcast brought to you by Communication Workers of America, CWA, with Progressive Allies. building a mass movement to restore workers' bargaining rights and reclaim our democracy. Learn more at their website. It's packed with information, cwa-union.org. Now this. You know, it really doesn't matter what time of year it is. You got to clean stuff in the house, in the garage, just general cleaning. If you're going to use something, you might as well use the absolute best. I use BioGreen Clean, and I recommend it to everybody. You got a cleaning job to do? This is what you want to use. BioGreen Clean. It's from the earth. It's plant-derived. You can use it year-round on everything. The garage, the kitchen, bathroom, floor, rugs, walls, general cleaning. It does it. Pet stains, you name it. Listen to Candy.
I was cleaning my oven. You normally have to take the shelves out, and they were really disgusting, just like the bottom of the oven was. And I normally would have to scrub them with steel wool and all sorts of stuff to get the stuff off. But I didn't have time, so I just put them in the sink, filled it up with water, and I put in some BioGreen Clean, and came back later and saw all this stuff floating in the water and realized that it had cleaned it all by itself, and all I had to do was take a rag and wipe it down. And I was like, oh, my God, this was the easiest thing. My oven looks like it's brand new again.
That's how strong it is. And you know what? It's effective, and you wouldn't believe what it does to petroleum products like grease or oil or any kind of gas, and it leaves no odor. It's amazing. BioGreen Clean is from the earth. It's plant-derived. It's 100% American, 100% effective, and truly eco-friendly. 100% satisfaction guarantee to your money back. Order today. Go to my website at WeGotEd.com and order, or go to BioGreenClean.com. That's BioGreenClean.com. They'll have a demonstration right there on the website. I'm showing you just how effective and how good it is. Order today. BioGreen Clean. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. One uninsulated steam valve will cost you 1 barrel of oil in heat loss per year. The average hospital has hundreds of these steam valves. The insulation on the valve pays for itself in less than a year. Adding the necessary insulation to the piping for a steam line is paid back in just 12 to 14 months. America, what are you thinking? We're wasting billions. Take the walk through your plant and look at the piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org and call their toll-free number to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit. That's iSaveTeam.org.
Subscribe to the Ed Schultz podcast today. Simply log on to iTunes, search for Ed Schultz, and click the subscribe button to have the show delivered to your preferred listening device daily, free of charge. Rate and review the podcast and tell us how we're doing. More details at WeGotEd.com.
You can follow me on Twitter at WeGotEd and at Ed Show. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the download. Thanks for the listen. RawStory.com has our podcast every day. The great folks that do the journalism there at Raw Story. Ring of Fire Radio, We Got Ed, and on iTunes. Back in 2004, it was the two-word culture that was just rammed home by the Republicans. They referred to John Kerry as the Massachusetts liberal. And over the years, the Republicans have always talked in the two-word culture. Private accounts, individual accounts, tax cuts, government takeover, job killer. We got a new one now. It's called Envy Economics, thrown out by Senator Paul Ryan, who's the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. Here it is.
What I think the president is trying to do here is to, again, exploit envy economics. This top-down redistribution doesn't work. We've been doing it for 6 years. Look, it may make for good politics. It doesn't make for good economic growth.
It doesn't work. This is the president talking about free community college, higher wages, jobs, and new investment research. This is where his budget goes, but of course, 58 months of private sector job growth, 11 million jobs, unemployment below 6% consistently, the reversal of the automobile industry, the stimulus package. None of that has worked. Here's the president.
The budget that Congress now has in its hands is built on those values. It helps working families' paychecks go farther by treating things like paid sick leave and child care as the economic priorities that they are. It gives Americans of every age the chance to upgrade their skills so they can earn higher wages. And it includes my plan to make 2 years of community college free for responsible students. It lets us keep building the world's most attractive economy for high-wage jobs with new investments in research and infrastructure and manufacturing, as well as expanded access to faster internet and new markets for goods made in America.
All common sense stuff, all good things. Who's against it? All Republicans. The American economy, by numerous measures, definitely in recovery. The national unemployment rate was 6.2% in 2013, down from 9.3% in 2009. U.S. gross domestic product grew 5% in the third quarter of last year. And the S&P 500 recently reached its all-time high. The middle class still needs a break. Based on the average pre-tax income earned by the third quintile, we have got, or middle class, 20% of earners in each state. Middle class incomes in California declined the most in the country. Incomes among middle class California households fell by nearly 7% from 2009 to 2013. Now, those are the Obama years, and I think a lot of it has to do with obstruction. A lot of it has to do with the fact that there has been a lack of investment in our country, that it's been outsourced in many regards. How does this all play? What is the signal to America on this? Joe Valenti is the Director of Asset Building Center for American Progress. Joe, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Ed. You know, I think you said it absolutely right. You mentioned the S&P is at an all-time high. You mentioned that we've had the 11 million new jobs. The recovery is in the 401ks. We're not necessarily seeing it in the paychecks. If you look at the growth in the concentration of wealth, the top 1% currently holding 40% of the wealth of all Americans, it's clear that wages have been stagnant, but productivity has gone up. American workers are working harder than ever. They're not seeing it in their paychecks. They might see it in their investments if they're lucky enough to have the retirement plans and the other investments where they can see that growth.
So I gave a commentary last week on TV on the Ed Show. If the Democrats really believe the way this is legislatively unfolding in this session of Congress, we're just as divided as we've ever been. So if the Democrats really believe that minimum wage is the thing that they've got to have, that this is going to change the economy to help out middle-class families, to set a new bar of income, then they're going to have to filibuster everything and tell the Republicans you're not going to get anything. Now, I'm talking about a legislative strategy. But the way things are going right now, what's going to change middle-class wages?
You know, it's got to be the minimum wage. We've seen that happen at the state level. I think that's part of it. We see it in the president's proposals around the earned income tax credit, child tax credit. We also see it in the work that the president put forward around all the different costs that the middle class is dealing with, whether it's the cost of child care that's going through the roof, whether it's the cost of college. The cost of higher ed has gone up 62% since the year 2000. You know, middle class today hasn't had all the same opportunities that generations in the past did. Our homeownership rate hit a 20-year low. Homeownership for Americans under 35 is at the lowest point in my lifetime.
Of course, the housing sector hasn't bounced back the way we expected it to, and that's the number I think you're reflecting to, since the Great Recession. So,
right. We've got to think about all these costs. We've got to think about housing. We've got to think about child care, education, retirement. We've got to think about the basics, because in the past 15 years or so, wages for middle-class Americans have been more or less steady, but we found that the costs for the typical middle-class family have gone up by $10,000.
Mm-hmm. Joe Valenti with us, Director of Asset Building, Center for American Progress. Let's play that sound cut of Paul Ryan again. Envy Economics. He claims nothing's working.
What I think the president is trying to do here is to, again, exploit envy economics. This top-down redistribution doesn't work. We've been doing it for 6 years. Look, it may make for good politics. It doesn't make for good economic growth.
Your response to that, Joe?
You know, it's not about envy economics. It's about figuring out how families can be working harder than ever and still having trouble making ends meet. It's about the fact that a generation ago, you could work and pay for college and have a good financial footing when you graduate. And today, we've got $1.3 trillion in student loan debt outstanding, and we've got young people who are dealing with student loan debt that keeps them, in their parents' basements, or it keeps them renting when they could be owning. It keeps them from making a lot of the steps they could be taking to spend and really be part of this recovery.
So what does rearranging the tax code do for the middle class? I mean, they're talking about lowering the corporate tax rate. They think that this is going to curb the wave of foreign investment into American companies to avoid paying tax. Your response to that? How does that help the middle class?
Well, the one way that it can, the president's budget has directed the new corporate tax revenues that come in toward infrastructure. And that's not a perfect deal, but we know that 65% of the roads in this country are in less than good condition. The president's proposed $500 billion for infrastructure. That's the way to get it. The other parts of the tax piece in the president's budget are also important. He would increase the tax rates on capital gains and dividends back to the levels during the Reagan years, which I think for most working families, seem like those would be pretty good rates to be dealing with, and it would use the revenues from all of these tax proposals to expand paid leave, to expand child care, to expand higher education, quality preschool, all the things that really address the cost issues that middle-class families are facing.
Joe Valenti, good to have you with us. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ed.
You bet. Director of Asset Building, Center for American Progress. Tonight on the Ed Show on MSNBC, health care. Okay, so they want to repeal it. And this is going to be thrown into the Senate after they vote into the House, and we're going to find out what conservative Democrats who campaigned on, we got to fix what needs to be fixed on Obamacare. Okay, does that mean you want to repeal it? Mitch McConnell's going to give him a chance. He'll throw it to the floor after it passes again to repeal over in the House. It'll be House vote number, I think, 65. Nancy Pelosi, Democratic leader, yesterday tweeted out she felt like it was Groundhog Day because the Republicans have voted to repeal Obamacare so many times. The bottom line here is, by admission, now they say they don't have a plan. They don't have anything to replace it with. It's like you going in bitching to the boss about what's going on the job, but, you don't have any ideas. You just know what's wrong. And that's where the Republicans are. It's more of the symbolic hatred for the president and the dismissal of him as a president than anything else. They won't give it up. We'll talk about it tonight, 5 o'clock Eastern, MSNBC and The Ed Show. This has been brought to you by the Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team. See you tonight. We'll be back tomorrow.